Hello friends, Miss Huey here, and today Jeannie and I will both be reading Chapter 7 of Lunch Money to you by Andrew Clements. Chapter 7, Order and Chaos. Ashworth Intermediate School was a big outfit, and when you put 450 kids, mostly between the ages of 9 and 12, under one roof, a certain amount of hubbub and clutter is normal, and therefore room 27 was not normal. Room 27 at Ashworth School was never messy, never loud. Room 27 was always like a peaceful island, an oasis of order and calm. That's because the small kingdom known as Room 27 was controlled by Mr. Anthony Xenotopoulos, who, for obvious reason, was simply known as Mr. Z. Mr. Z was a man of average size, except perhaps for his head, which seemed a bit too large for his body. But that might have been an optical illusion caused by the burst of black and gray hair spiraling out 1 or 2 inches in all directions. Apart from his unruly hair, Mr. Z dressed neatly, but not formally. He wore a coat and tie only for the end-of-year assembly. The rest of the time, he wore khakis or corduroys and loose-fitting collared shirts, carefully ironed. He had piercing dark eyes and a bright smile, which made it harder to notice the large nose that lived between them. Mr. Z taught 6th graders, and in his kingdom, mathematics ruled. Everything about his room, including its legendary calmness, was a function of math. Mr. Z did not just teach 6th grade math, he lived it. He breathed and ate and slept and dreamed math. His wife taught geometry at a high school, so you could even say that he had married math. Plus, their only son was an engineering major at the state university. For Mr. Z, math was the source of all that was beautiful, good, and true. Math controlled the orbits of the planets, always in perfect, stressless balance. Math was frictionless. Math supplied the principles that sent rockets past the moon and helped Beethoven create his symphonies. Mr. Z believed that even the smile on the Mona Lisa, like the spiral of the chambered nautilus, could be expressed as a ratio, a set of elegant numbers. Then the alarm clock sound, the thermometer, the calendar, the digital watch on his wrist, the odometer in his car, the tests and quiz scores of his students, the percentage points of his grading scale, these gave him the numbers he lived by. He awoke each day at 6:15, school or no school. Channel 7's weather forecasts were the most accurate. He'd done a 3-year study himself. So a predicted high temperature of 70 degrees or warmer, khaki pants and a short-sleeved shirt. 69 degrees or below equals corduroys and long sleeves. And for high temperatures of 40 degrees or lower, plus 1 sweater. So I guess the corduroys and the long sleeves plus the sweater. And here's a picture of Mr. Z himself, right there, with all that curly hair. Mr. Z put his heavy down coat into storage on March 1st and got it out again on October 1st. He had an appointment at the barbershop every 3rd Thursday at 4:15 p.m. He changed the oil in his white Toyota Camry every 5,500 miles, and when the odometer reached 110,000 miles, the 20th oil change, he and his wife began shopping for a new white Camry. Why a Camry? Math. The Camry was the car that cost the least amount of dollars, had the most features he could afford, and had the fewest service problems. Why white? Again, math. White was the color that kept the inside temperature of the car the lowest in the summer, when running the air conditioner meant buying more gas and getting fewer miles per gallon. There were 185 school days per year and 55 minutes in each class period. Mr. Z wrote the number of remaining minutes of math class on the board at the start of each school day, beginning at 10,155. I'm sorry, guys. All the math numbers. 10,175 minutes. Quiz scores counted once, and test scores counted twice. Grade percentages were calculated out to 3 decimal places, then rounded up. And arguing about grades was pointless. Numbers never lied. Mr. Z had a sense of humor, but it was a mathematical sense of humor. He wasn't witty or clever, but he had almost endless supply of math puns. What did the triangle say to the circle? Your life seems so pointless. What did the 90-degree angle say to the 91-degree angle? Don't be obtuse. You're always so negative. What did the plus sign say to the minus sign? You're always so negative. Why didn't the rectangular equilateral like jazz? He was square. And so was Mr. Z. And Mr. Z seemed stiff or set in his ways or rigid in his views. That was like a function of math as well. In math, there were fixed rules. Math involved pure operations that required no bending, no guesswork, no emotional adjustments, only the glide and flow of intelligence. There were always answers, right answers, and it was possible to understand exactly what was right about them. And that's why Mr. Z loved math. Loved, not liked, not enjoyed, not appreciated. Loved. He loved thinking about math, he loved using it, and most of all, he loved teaching it. Math was perfect. Math clarified the jumbled minds and disciplined the untidy lives of his students. So many things changed constantly. Politics, weather, the price of energy, the cover of Time magazine, but not math. As he told his students, now and forever, 2 plus 2 will always equal 4, every single day. But on this particular day, with 9,790 minutes of math class remaining in his 6th grade year, Greg Kenton came stomping into the orderly room of 27 with a head full of chaos. He walked straight over to Mora Shaw. He slapped the eensy-beensy book down onto her desk, and through clenched teeth he said, "Nice rip-off. You are such a thief. You stole my idea and you know it, so stop it. Stop it now." Mora jumped up, nose to nose with Greg. "Oh sure, like you invented paper and drawings, and words too, right? Just so you know, anybody can make anything they want to, and they can sell stuff too. It's a free country, like for over 200 years, or haven't you heard?" Mr. Z looked up from his grade book, saw the disturbance in aisle 4, and got to his feet. Speaking as he moved, he was at the scene in 3 seconds. All right there, easy does it. Greg, lower your voice. Mora, you too, and sit down. Now what's this about?" "Simple," Greg said. He opened his pencil case and said, "I started making these great little comic books, and now she's ripping me off with her stupid imitation. She's using my idea, and it's like she's stealing money right out of my pocket." He pointed at the uniform book on her desk. "That's what this is all about." Mora shook her head. "What it's about is that you're a greedy little money grubber, just like always. Mine, mine, mine. That's all you ever care about. That's a lie." "All right," said Mr. Z, "calm down." But Mora was on her feet again. "It's true, and poor Whittle Greg can't stand it when anybody else has a good idea." Greg snorted and grabbed the eensy-beensy book. "Yeah, right, like this is a good idea. You know what this is? This is garbage. Cheap, stupid garbage, just like you." And Greg ripped the front cover of the Lost Unicorn and threw it in Mora's face. "Both of you, stop this. Just stop it." It was like Mr. Z had disappeared. All Mora could see was the little book as Greg began to tear off another page. "Give me that!" She swung her right arm to grab for it, and Greg yanked the book above her head. And as Mora's hand followed the moving book, the bottom 3 knuckles of her right hand continued with a sharp crack against the left side of Greg's nose. Greg's mouth dropped open, and so did Mr. Z's and Mora's. Then there was a half-second of stunned silence, and then, "Ow!" Greg clutched his nose, which began to bleed, dripping into Mora's desk. Room 27, usually quieter than the library, flashed to life. "Did you see that?" "What? Where?" "Mora. She pounded him." "No way." "I saw it. Look at his nose." "Ooh, blood." And amid all the other noise, Mora squeaked out, Oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to. I really didn't." Mr. Z wanted to take charge. He wanted to quiet the room, calm Mora, and get Greg to the nurse, but there was blood. Numbers never bleed, which Mr. Z believed was one of their best qualities, because just the word blood was enough to make him start looking for a chair so he could sit down and put his head between his knees. Mr. Z turned away from Greg, already woozy. His face was going gray, but as he slumped into the nearest empty desk, swallowing hard, he managed to say, "Mora, please help Greg get to the nurse. I'll be here." Mora rushed to the front of the room, yanked 5 or 6 tissues from the box on Mr. Z's desk, and hurried back to Greg. "Here." Greg accepted the tissues, but when Mora took his elbow and began steering him toward the hallway, he jerked his arm free and made his own way out of the door. It was bad enough he'd just gotten a bloody nose from a girl. No way he was going to let that same girl turn around and help him. Mora stopped at the doorway of the nurse's office, and Mrs. Emmett took charge. Sitting Greg on the black vinyl cot, she grabbed a plastic cold pack from a cabinet and smacked it on her desk 3 or 4 times to activate the crystals. She pulled on a pair of green gloves, took a paper towel, got it wet at the sink, and began to clean up Greg's face. Leaned forward, the nurse took the damp cloth pack and wrapped it in a damp washcloth. Leaning over, she looked at the marks on Greg's chin and then pressed the cold pack gently against his face. Miss Emmett said, "How'd this happen?" It would have been so easy for Greg to lift his bloody hand, point a crimson finger, and shout, "Mora did it! She lugged me right in the nose. Hard." He could have yelled so loud the principal across the hall would have heard him, but he didn't. He murmured, "It was an accident. Somebody grabbed for something, and I got in the way." The nurse lifted the cold pack and touched Greg's nose carefully with her gloved fingers. He flinched. Miss Emmett said, it's not broken, but you're going to have a black eye, a real prize winner. You need to stay here till I'm sure the bleeding has stopped. She pressed the cold pack back in place and said, put your left hand here and press. Not too hard. Greg did as he was told. Turning to the doorway, Miss Emmett said, Maura, did any blood get on you? Maura looked at her hands and down her front. She shook her head. Anywhere else? Asked the nurse. Where did this happen? In Mr. Z's room. Some drops got on his desk and maybe on the floor. Miss Emmett nodded. I'll send the custodian with disinfectant. You should go back to class now. Maura hesitated. It was nice Greg hadn't blamed her, and she wanted him to turn and look at her. She wanted at least to nod a thanks to him, but Greg kept his eyes shut. Samora turned and left. Miss Emmett said, Greg, I have to go find the custodian. You can lean back on those pillows now, but stay still, all right? And she was gone. The whole side of Greg's face throbbed as he eased himself back. Great, a black eye. From a girl. Just what I always wanted. What Maura had said in Mr. Z's room came back to him. You're a greedy little money grubber. Just like always. Those words hurt. Worse than his nose. His big brothers had been calling him stingy and greedy for years. Is that what they all think? That I'm a money grubber? Everybody wants a lot of money, right? What's wrong with that? Can I help it if I have good ideas and that I'm willing to work? There's nothing wrong with that. Greg became aware that he had something clutched in his right hand. He brought it up where he could see it. It was the wad of bloody tissues, and something else, Maura's miniature book, The Lost Unicorn. The front cover was gone, and some of the wrinkled pages were streaked with blood, illustrated in living color, Greg thought, and that made him smile, which forced a sharp pain up through his nose and left eye. He got the book in focus, and using only his right hand, he began to turn the pages. Greg could tell right away that this wasn't his kind of story, which did not come as a surprise. It was a young unicorn, Jeannie, who was lost and terrified, but then who'd gotten lost, also not a surprise. At first, the unicorn was terrified, and then she remembered what her mother and father taught her. If you ever have a problem, find someone with a bigger problem and offer to help. Do this, and your own worries will disappear. So the unicorn went looking for someone to help and found a princess who had been kidnapped, locked in a tower. Jeannie. So the unicorn went looking for someone to help and found a princess who had been kidnapped, locked in a tower by a wicked ogre. The unicorn used her horn to chop down a tree, which leaned against the tower, and gave the princess a way to escape. Then the unicorn gave the princess a ride back to her mother's castle. The queen was so happy to have her daughter back that she asked 10 of her best knights to help the unicorn find her way home, and they all lived happily ever after. Even though it seemed like a lame story to him, Greg had to admit that the writing was good. And the artwork wasn't bad either. It was actually a tiny picture book, and not at all like the comic book. Each of Maura's pictures took up a whole page. There was no sequence panels, no page grids, and no speech balloons like comics have. Still, the drawings were good, and Maura had drawn vines and flowers around the borders of each page. Bringing the little book closer to his eye, Greg blinked. Then he rubbed his finger on the page. The dark gray lines smudged and smeared. He could not believe what he was seeing. It is. This is original artwork. Maura's drawing every book by hand and putting them together at one time. No wonder she went nuts when I started ripping this one up. Leaning his head back and closing his eyes, Greg smiled. He just made an important discovery. This meant that Maura did not know how to mass-produce her books. It meant that she had probably made only 4 or 5 of them tops. And it meant that at her current skill level as a mini-book producer, she was just messing around. Hardly a serious competitor. Maura wasn't even in the minor leagues. And as his business mind clicked away, Greg saw the future grow bright again, with kids buying so many of his chunky comics that he would make tons of money. He would have to start getting his comics printed professionally. He'd have to hire a staff of artists to keep up with the increasing demand, maybe rent a building, or buy one. He'd start a website and start selling to the major comic distributors too. Eventually he'd have to open a branch office in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Hong Kong, and London too. Chunky Comics International. He'd get so rich that he could have a different limo for every day of the week, each with a comic book hero painting on the hood. Bring! Greg sat straight up, completely fuddled. He blinked. A cold pack lay on his arm, his head hurt, and he was in the cot in the nurse's office. Then the events of the day tumbled back into his memory. He'd been sound asleep. Miss Emmett smiled at him from her desk. Feeling better? Yeah, a little. Greg leaned back again, reaching for the cold back. But then he made himself sit up. Actually, I feel a lot better, so I guess I could go to my next class. Greg had work to do. One more class period, and Thursday would be history. He had comics to sell. Moore came to the doorway. Hi, I brought your backpack and your pencil case. Your face looks better. Greg didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Moore said, You're going to class? Greg looked at Miss Emmett. Can I? She nodded. You should be fine, but if you feel uncomfortable, come back, all right? Okay, Greg stood up and walked to the door. Thanks. You're welcome. Moore gave Greg his things. He swung his backpack onto one shoulder, tucked the pencil case under his other arm, and headed down the long hallway toward the gym. Moore turned and walked beside him. So, she said, you've got gym now? Nope, Greg picked up his pace. Moore matched him, step for step. Language arts? No, art. Greg walked so fast that Moore almost had to trot to keep up. Hey, she said, before I forget, you have to go to Mr. Z's room after school. Still walking, Greg glanced at her. How come? He wants to talk to you. And me. About what happened. Great, said Greg. I'll be late for soccer. Moore said, should you run around today? I mean, with your eye and everything? Greg stopped short and swung to her face. Look, it's none of your business. It was just a little poke in the nose, all right? I'm okay, and I don't need you to tell me what to do. Fine, said Moore. Do whatever you want. I don't care. Good, because I don't care if you don't care, so go away. Don't worry, I'm going. Here, said Moore, pushed a quarter into his hands. This is yours. What's this for? He asked. One of your comics. They're a quarter, right? What, you sold one? No, said Moore. I bought one. You? That's right. Moore stuck her chin out. Any law against it? No, said Greg, but why? That's a stupid question. I read it in math class. It's good. Creative pride won a small victory over ill temper. Greg smiled. You liked it? Really? Moore nodded. Yeah, it was okay, but... The bell rang. Oops, I can't be late. Moore turned and dashed for class. But what? Greg called after her. Later, she called back, and Greg thought, later? Oh yeah, because we have to go see Mr. Z. The art room was closed, and Greg quickly forgot Moore's comment about his comic book. He had to finish a wire sculpture. The thing was due Monday, and it was going to take a small miracle to get it done on time. Still, that didn't keep Greg from selling 3 more copies of Return of the Hunter before the end of art class. And that was Chapter 7 of Lunch Money.